Tell me about your vision.
Well, my vision is a world where people have a better relationship with failure. And whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a mom, whether you're a kid going through college, I think that failure is a necessary step towards impact, towards success, really even to fulfillment. And most people really have a negative view of failure. And I can unpack that more, but that's the gist of it.
Tell me more.
Okay. So even though I own a financial company, we do long-term financial planning. We help people make sure they don't run out of money or purpose in retirement. I was not always on this path. In fact, my degree is actually in biochemistry, and that's very important because what I learned going through my experience as a chemist is the importance of experiments. And with an experiment, we weren't just willy-nilly, we weren't just trying things. We would research, we would plan, we were very intentional, but we weren't married to the outcome. We were more concerned about what can we learn from the process. So when things didn't go the way that we wanted them to, when something came up that was unexpected, rather than looking at it as a setback, we'd like, okay, what can we learn? This is something that we didn't know. We just learned something. Or we have an opportunity to learn something. So if we looked at failure as an experiment, again, not that we don't go into a situation mindful and prepared. We do have to be prepared. You want to research, you want to study, but so often, especially for entrepreneurs, but for anybody, Harry, perfect is often the enemy of done. We don't want to do anything until we have a perfect plan, and perfection actually becomes an excuse for procrastination. And then when we do go start doing the thing, nothing ever goes as planned. And when we hit failure or we hit setbacks, I hate even calling it failure because it's such a negative connotation. But when we experience setbacks, we experience that as failure. Or, oh no, this is bad, rather than there's a lesson in here. So the only difference between a setback or a failure and an experiment is whether or not you're going into that willing to learn from the process.
Thank you for sharing that. So, how has that helped you, and why is this your why? Like, why do you care about all this?
Because I grew up wanting to only do things I knew that I would succeed at. And I think if people, this is going to sound weird, Harry, but if people failed more often, they would actually experience more fulfillment, because the fear of failure is what stops people from doing things. It's what stops people from pursuing relationships and dreams and businesses and educations. It's what stops us from pursuing the best versions of ourselves. That's what failure, the fear of failure does. So failure is not nearly as destructive as the fear of it. And if we create a better relationship with failure, we can step into that better version of ourselves. I believe that the best version of me probably is on the other side of a door of setbacks and failure. But growing up, I found success early in life in certain sports and some areas of academics, and I got to the point where I had a very fixed mindset. I didn't want to do anything that might rattle that perception that, oh, I'm really good at this. So what happened was I stopped attempting new things. I started trying things, even if they were really enticing or really like tugging on my heart area. I wouldn't do them because I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be good at this, or I don't know if I'm going to succeed. I don't know if this idea is going to work. So rather than potentially experience failure, I wouldn't even try. And that to me is the most extreme form of failure, is never even attempting.
So, how did you get started on this path that you're on today now?
Well, it, there was a lot of steps along the way, and I'll try to give you the quick version. So this and let me just explain something too. The fear of failure never goes away. And to be truly courageous, I believe fear is necessary. If I step into a situation, whether it's charging a battlefield or opening a business, if I don't experience any fear or trepidation, number one, there's a chance I'm probably somewhat reckless or maybe not taking this as seriously as I should. But number two, there's no bravery in that. There's no bravery or courage in the absence of fear. So something has to scare us a little bit in order for us to step forward in courage. But the other part of that too is there's always failure stings, rejection stings. I'm not pretending that you ever quite get away from that. In my business, I actually calculated this out. I have been rejected personally by people about 75,000 times prospecting for clients and things like that. That's a lot of failure if you look at it that way. And it stings every time. Now, it doesn't affect me as much as it used to. But one of the most pivotal moments of my life was recognizing that I had this fear and I didn't want to try new things. And there's so much of my life that I was missing out on because I wouldn't step into the unknown. And human beings have a penchant or a proclivity to grasp onto uncertainty, or sorry, onto certainty. We don't want to experience ambiguity. And sometimes we stay in a rut of our own life because we don't want to experience the ambiguity of stepping out into the unknown. Even if we know where we are, we don't want to step into the unknown. And that's exactly where I was when I was in college. I was recognizing this. And again, I had done well in sports growing up, and the college I was at didn't offer a couple of the sports that I had particularly excelled in. And somebody encouraged me, why don't you try track and field? I'd never done track in and of itself. I trained that way to increase my speed for football and baseball and other sports. And I'll tell you, man, I could feel like all these fears building up inside me. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to live in fear anymore. And I went to the coach and I explained my situation, and I was asking him for an opportunity to walk on, fully expecting him to say no. But that was like, I'm going to be okay with that, even if he tells me no. Well, what scared me even more than him saying no was him saying, yes, I will give you a chance, but here's what it's going to look like. And then I thought, wow, this is for real. Like I'm gonna have to put my money where my mouth is, so to speak. And he gave me an opportunity to make the team. And I ended up making the team. And about 10 days before our first meet, I tear my quad. And it felt like such a public failure. I literally did this in the middle of practice and we were working on our start. So I was coming out of the blocks and something didn't quite feel right, but I was trying to push through it. And then it just went. My quadricep just went. And it felt in the moment like such an utter failure, a huge setback. And literally, like my team's watching, and I'm gonna miss our very first meet. But you know what? I survived. And and all those things, like that was the worst that could happen in my mind. And the worst happened, and I didn't die. Yeah, it stung. It literally hurt, but it wasn't the end. It wasn't as devastating as I thought it could be. So I think experiencing a very visceral failure and locking horns with that allowed me to face some of kind of the insecurities even within my own soul and spirit, and to move on and to not let that be the end of the story.
Thank you for sharing that. It gives me a lot of insights on where you come from. So, what's the journey been like from that day you tore your quad to the lessons you learned and what you are today with your company? Like, so what's how did that all come about?
Well, so I didn't realize this at the time because, again, in college, I was pursuing a career in medicine. I was getting my degree in biochemistry. Um, but several years into this business, and again, those early years, a lot of that was calling relative strangers, inviting them into, hey, do you have a plan for your retire? Do you have your plan for your future? Most people don't have a plan to run out of money in retirement. But Harry, do you have a plan not to? You know, those are types of questions I was posing, and a lot of times you're catching people off guard. So again, a lot of rejection, and that was starting to really wear me down. All those, because again, that the pain of a setback never goes away. Or sorry, the pain of an individual setback never goes away, but they still sting in the moment. So I was letting that pain kind of build up again, and and realizing that I was no longer viewing these setbacks as experiments. So what I had to do is flip how I viewed those rejections. And I started gamifying it. And here's what I've learned, and this has application. So if you're not in sales, you're not doing prospecting calls, you're not trying to raise money, it doesn't matter. But I focused on the input rather than on the outcome, because that's what an experiment does. We want to make our input, our preparation, our planning, and how we execute the process with excellence. But the outcome is not up to us. The outcome, there's too many other variables outside of our control. And that's how I brought prospecting and sales into more of a gamified version where I wasn't focused on the outcome. I wanted a certain outcome. I wanted this person to say, yes, I'll meet with you. Yes, I would love to invest with you. Yes, let's partner together. That's what I wanted, but that wasn't going to be how I counted my wins, Harry. My win was showing up and asking the question, putting myself in front of a referral or a complete stranger and offering my uniqueness to benefit the life of somebody else, and doing it in such a way that I could feel excellence coming out of me. And if they said no, fine. That was still a win because I put myself in the pathway of success. I couldn't guarantee my success, but I stepped out of my comfort zone. I put myself in that pathway and I focused on the inputs and learned not to be tied so much to the outcomes.
Thank you for sharing that with me today. Um, I have one more question for you before we end today's segment. What is your goal for being on the show today, Chad?
I want people to see another side of failure. I want people to see setbacks as a way of growing. And I'll just give you a metaphor. For growing up in sports, growing up in athletics, physical training was a very important thing. And the idea of pushing yourself to failure, whether it was with lifting weights or running sprints, like you're pushing yourself to a limit to the point where, man, your body's just not really responding anymore. Like you've hit your limit. And in athletics, it was understood like pushing yourself to failure is a good, like, that's how you grow. That's how you get faster. That's how you get stronger. But we don't use that in other areas of our life. And what setbacks and failure teach people is where their limitations are. And a lot of us, I don't think, realize what our limitations are because we haven't pushed ourselves that limit. We are so much more capable. We are so much stronger. We're so much more talented and gifted than we give ourselves credit for. But until we push the envelope of what our limits truly are, we're never going to reach those. Number one. And number two, we're never going to push those limits out, because those are two things. Number one, you have a limit today, but you probably don't know where it is. And number two, that limit is not fixed. You can come back a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, be a better version of yourself. And those limits are even more expansive or even further out than they were before. So we don't know what our true limitations are until we press them. And until we press them, those limits can't be pushed back.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. When you're pushing those limits, Chad, and when you're experiencing failure in the moments, like how has that the feeling changed for you? You mean experiencing failure in the moment and realizing, oh, this is something different than I used to do. What does that change like for you?
Again, the sting is often still there, but there's a curiosity now.
Mhm.
There's there's an inquisitive piece of me. It's like, okay, what is this teaching me? What is the lesson that I can pull out of this? Can I do something different? Or was this just, you know, this thing I was trying, it would never have worked regardless of what I tried. So I don't beat myself up, even if I made a mistake. Okay. Um, I'm going to get another at bat in life. This isn't my only chance. So even if the the outcome or the lack of a positive outcome was on my shoulders, okay, I can learn from this. And sometimes I might learn I'm not going to approach this situation or this type of person anymore because that's not really what aligns with my goal or the future that I'm trying to build. So I think it's allowing that inquisitive nature again, that chemist part of me back into saying, okay, what is this situation teaching me? And what it does is a couple things. Number one, it creates more of a growth mindset. But number two, it allows the rational part of my brain to catch up to the emotional part. Because when we experience a setback, when we experience ambiguity, when something happens to us that is unexpected, unforeseen, or unwanted, it's really easy to get emotional. We can get worked up, we can get frustrated, our gut starts to get tight, our breathing changes, our heart rate increases. There's a lot of physiological things that happens, and all those things are signs of the emotional part of our brain taking over. And when you ask that question, what can I learn? What are the lessons? It gives your emotions pause for just a second and allows the thinking, rational part of your brain a chance to catch up with your emotions so we don't react emotionally and we can rationally step through the process.
Thank you for being here today. I'm really happy that you tuned in to Vision Pros Live. I'm looking forward to seeing your reactions as these episodes continue to move forward. This is going to get more and more fun. We'll have more and more engagement as well. We'll invite people to participate in the show. And thank you for giving us your time and attention. Have an excellent time building out your vision and becoming a vision pro yourself.